In the opulent Silver Lantern restaurant, Japanese Admiral Aiko Nakamura, adorned in her formal uniform, faces humiliation as the arrogant maitre d' denies her entry due to a dress code. Her daughter, Jenny, seethes, but Aiko maintains stoic dignity. Just as they turn to leave, a humble janitor, Brandon Hayes, bows deeply, perfectly, and speaks to Aiko in flawless Japanese. "Excuse me, Admiral." The unexpected act of profound respect freezes the room, igniting a connection that will shatter Brandon's carefully hidden past and force Aiko to confront a 6-year-old mystery. The Silver Lantern, an establishment whispered about in soft, reverent tones by New Yorkers, glowed like a beacon on this cold March night. Its warm lighting, never dim, polished every wine glass to an angelic sheen, reflecting the city's well-dressed elite who drifted in and out, carried by an invisible tide of privilege. Waiters glided between tables. Soft jazz curled through the air, and everything felt effortlessly elegant for those who belonged. Admiral Aiko Nakamura stood just inside the entrance, her breath still tight from the wind outside, even within her formal Navy uniform, heavy with insignia and ribbons representing a lifetime of service. She seemed strangely out of place amid the chatter and clinking glasses. Her posture remained straight, her expression calm, but her dark, deep, sharply observant eyes held a quiet fatigue. To the American public, she was merely another dignitary. To those in the Pacific, she was a legend. But tonight, none of that seemed to matter. Bernard, the tall young maitre d' with slicked back hair and the confidence of someone who had never known denial, blocked her path. His polite but immovable smile was a barrier. "I am sorry, ma'am," he said, his eyes flicking toward her uniform with clear disapproval. "This establishment requires evening attire for all guests. We cannot seat you in that." Behind Aiko, her daughter, Jenny, 26 and graceful in a striking red dress, stiffened. Her eyes widened with disbelief. "Excuse me," Jenny said sharply. "This is my mother's diplomatic uniform." Bernard merely lifted his chin. "Dress code is dress code." A whisper rippled through nearby tables. A few diners glanced over, curious, but not curious enough to intervene. Most looked away, retreating into the safe distance of silence, pretending not to see, hoping not to be involved. It was the kind of silence that carried judgment, not from cruelty, but from indifference. Aiko inhaled slowly. She was trained to withstand pressure, humiliation, the harsh winds of politics and military protocol, but being dismissed so quietly, so coldly, on foreign soil, pierced deeper than she expected. "I see," she murmured. "If that is your rule, I will not argue." Her fingers, however, trembled slightly as she reached for Jenny's hand. Jenny's voice cracked. "Mom, please, let us just go somewhere else. You should not be treated like this." Her eyes glistened. The humiliation was not hers, yet she felt it all the same. Aiko offered a faint, reassuring smile. "Jenny, it is all right. Not every place understands our ways." But in her chest, an old, familiar ache stirred, the ache of carrying honor on shoulders tired from decades of command. She turned toward the door, ready to leave quietly and preserve what dignity she could. And that was when a voice spoke behind her, gentle, warm, and unmistakably respectful. "Sumimasen, Taisho." "Excuse me, Admiral." The sound froze her in place. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple janitor's uniform, stepped forward from a discreet cleaning cart near the hallway. His long hair brushed his shoulders, and a trimmed beard softened what might otherwise have been a rugged face. His eyes were kind, steady, familiar in a way Jenny could not explain. The restaurant fell silent again, but this time with confusion. The man stopped 3 steps from Aiko. Then, with remarkable grace, so smooth it felt like a memory pulled from another lifetime, he bowed deep, precisely, perfectly. It was not an American attempt at politeness, not a tourist mimicry, but a true bow, a bow of respect, a bow of understanding, the kind she had not seen outside Japan for many, many years. Aiko's breath caught. The janitor straightened slowly and spoke again in fluent, gentle Tokyo Japanese. "Taisho, if they will not honor your presence, allow me to offer mine." Jenny's mouth fell open. Even Bernard blinked, startled. Aiko stared at the stranger, struggling to reconcile the impossibility of what she was seeing. His accent was perfect, his manner practiced, his eyes steady and sincere in a way she recognized deeply from soldiers who had endured things they never spoke about. "You speak Japanese," she whispered in English, her composure cracking slightly. The man smiled, not proudly, not shyly, but with a warmth that felt almost like an embrace. "I do," he replied softly, "and it is an honor to speak to you." Jenny leaned closer to her mother. "Mom, who is he?" Aiko could not answer. The question echoed inside her. There was something familiar about him. Not his face, but the quiet heaviness in his gaze, the weight of someone who had carried too much too quietly for too long. Still, he extended his hand gently. "My name is Brandon Hayes. If you will allow me, I can help you find a seat." Before Aiko could respond, Bernard stepped forward, agitated. "Sir, you have no authority." Brandon turned to him, his voice still calm. "I am not giving orders. I am offering respect." Then he looked back at Aiko, his expression softening. "No one deserves to be dismissed for honoring their country." The words were simple, but they struck something deep within her. Jenny swallowed hard, her heart pounding. "Mom, he's the only one who stood up for you." Aiko looked around the room once more, the silent tables, the averted eyes, the indifference, and then at the man who bowed like a soldier. Remembering old vows, something shifted inside her, for the first time that night. She did not feel alone, for a long second. The world inside the silver lantern seemed to pause. It was not the kind of silence born from discomfort anymore, but something else, an attention that felt almost ceremonial, as if history itself had walked through the door. Brandon Hayes remained standing, his posture gentle, the last notes of his bow still echoing in the weight of the air around him. It was a gesture so practiced, so fluid, so unmistakably Japanese, that even Jenny, raised in America, felt a shiver glide down her spine. Her mother, Admiral Aiko Nakamura, stared at him with the quiet intensity of someone who had spent her life reading battlefield maps and silent truths in men's eyes, and in Brandon's eyes. She saw something she had not expected genuine, lived-in respect. "Brandon," Aiko murmured. The name felt strange on her tongue, foreign, yet spoken with a familiarity she did not understand. "How do you know our custom so well?" Before he could answer, Bernard stepped between them with stiff, forced professionalism. "Sir, you are a janitor here. You have duties to attend to. Please refrain from interacting with guests in this manner." Jenny shot him a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "He is not bothering us. You are." But Brandon lifted one hand, stopping her. "It is all right," he said calmly, like a man accustomed to being dismissed, accustomed to carrying burdens quietly so others would not have to. "He is just doing his job." The restraint in his voice struck Aiko harder than Bernard's arrogance. This was a man who had learned to swallow humiliation without losing dignity. Brandon turned back to the two women and switched languages again effortlessly. "Taisho, if you and your daughter need a table, please allow me to help." Bernard sputtered. "You cannot just—" But the restaurant manager, a middle-aged man with gray at his temples and a far more seasoned sense of public relations, hurried over. He had heard the commotion, and, more importantly, he had seen Jenny's expression, as fierce as her mother's was composed. "Is everything all right here?" he asked carefully, before Aiko could answer. Brandon spoke first, still soft, still respectful. "These ladies were denied seating due to dress code. I simply wish to offer assistance." The manager's jaw tightened. Aiko could read men well. He was not a bad man, just one who had not realized he was standing on the edge of an international embarrassment. Jenny stepped forward. "My mother is a foreign dignitary. That uniform represents decades of service and sacrifice. And he," she pointed at Brandon, "was the only one who treated her with basic human decency." The manager's eyes flicked to Aiko's medals. Realization flooded his features. "My deepest apologies, Admiral," he said quickly. "We will seat you immediately. Please, right this way." But Aiko did not move. She looked at Brandon. Something inside her, forged in naval service, tempered by war, by loss, by the weight of command, felt compelled to acknowledge what had just happened. She had been dismissed by a room full of strangers, but lifted by a man no one even noticed. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady but warm. "Mr. Hayes, would you join us?" Brandon blinked. "Ma'am, I am working." Jenny stepped beside him. "Please, you changed the whole night." Across the room, a few diners watched with growing curiosity. Brandon hesitated, not from fear, but from modesty so natural it felt like part of his skin. "If I take even a minute from my shift, the staff will have to cover for me." "Then let them," Jenny said, her voice gentler now. "Just this once." The manager cleared his throat. "Mr. Hayes, it is fine. Go ahead. We will manage." Brandon exhaled slowly, nodding once. "Thank you." He did not stride or swagger. He simply walked with the humble, steady grace of a man who had learned to take up as little space as possible in a world that often overlooked people like him. He guided Aiko and Jenny toward an empty table near a softly lit corner, one of the best in the room. As they approached, Jenny noticed the small details: how Brandon pulled out Aiko's chair first, how he adjusted the angle of the lamp so the light would not hit her eyes, how he placed the menu closer to her dominant hand. These were not restaurant gestures. These were military habits, observant, tactical, quietly protective. When the three finally sat, Aiko clasped her hands in her lap, studying him. "Brandon Hayes," she said slowly, "you bow like you trained in Japan." Brandon's smile was faint but honest. "I lived there for a time." Jenny leaned in, curiosity sparking. "For work." Brandon hesitated again. The way someone hesitates not because they are hiding something shameful, but because they are deciding whether a truth deserves to be spoken aloud. "Something like that," he said gently. "It was a long time ago." Aiko did not miss the flicker of pain behind his eyes. Before she could press further, a server approached with water. People watched from nearby tables, some discreetly, some openly. Not because the Admiral was here, but because the janitor who bowed was here. Yet Brandon behaved as though none of that mattered. He placed his napkin quietly on his lap, turned to Aiko, and spoke again in soft Tokyo Japanese. "You should never feel dishonored for wearing the uniform that shaped your life." Aiko inhaled sharply. Jenny felt her chest tighten. The restaurant felt suddenly too small to contain the weight of those words. Outside, the city continued its endless rush, but inside the silver lantern, something had shifted. 3 lives had touched for the first time, and none of them yet understood how deeply that touch would echo. Brandon sat across from Admiral Aiko Nakamura and her daughter Jenny with a gentle humility that felt almost out of place. His janitor uniform made him stand out, yet seated before them, he did not look small, if anything. He looked grounded, like a man who had learned that dignity did not come from fabric or rank, but from the weight of a person's choices. Aiko rested her palms lightly on the table, studying him with an attentiveness reserved for tactical briefings. Jenny could not stop stealing quiet glances at the man whose fluent Japanese and precise bow had unsettled the entire room. The server approached, placing menus before them. "For you, Admiral, and for your daughter." He hesitated, unsure what to call Brandon. "For me, as well. Thank you." Brandon rescued him with a small smile. The server nodded and hurried away. Grateful. Aiko watched this exchange carefully. "You handle people with unusual grace, Mr. Hayes." Brandon shook his head. "People handle me. I just try not to make their jobs harder." Jenny tilted her head. "That is not what we saw. You stood up for us. My mom, especially when no one else did." Brandon's gaze softened. "I did not stand up. I bowed." Aiko could not help it. Her lips curved into a quiet smile. A minute ago, she had felt the sting of rejection, the loneliness of a foreigner dismissed in a room that knew nothing about her sacrifices. Now she felt seen, not for her rank, but for her humanity. "May I ask," she said gently, "where you learned those customs so precisely?" Brandon traced a finger lightly along the edge of his water glass. "I lived in Yokosuka for a while," he said. "Years back." Aiko's breath hitched. Yokosuka was more than a name. It was the soul of Japan's maritime alliance. "What did you do there?" she asked. This time. He did not answer right away. His eyes drifted downward to the tablecloth, to the reflection of the overhead lights. The silence was not defensive. It was heavy, full of something unspoken. "Work," he finally said, "and things that did not always feel like work." Jenny leaned back, her eyes narrowing, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. "You sound like someone who does not talk about himself much." Brandon chuckled softly. "Talking is not one of my strengths." "Then bowing is," she teased lightly. Something about her playful tone drew the first real smile from him, a small one, but genuine, warming the edges of his otherwise guarded face. The restaurant hummed around them, unaware of the delicate threads being woven across their small table. The clinking of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the occasional burst of laughter all faded into a kind of distant backdrop. But the quietness at their table was different, not awkward, not strained. It was intimate. Aiko lifted her glass of water, taking a small sip. "Mr. Hayes." "Brandon," he corrected gently. She nodded. "Brandon, you did not hesitate to help us. Why?" He considered this. "I have seen people pushed aside," he said. "Good people, people who gave everything only to be treated like they did not matter. His voice lowered. I do not like watching that happen. Jenny's eyes softened. It happens to you. Does it not? Brandon did not confirm it. He did not need to. Aiko folded her hands, her gaze steady. In Japan, we call that kokuro no yami, the shadow of the heart. It grows from the things we carry alone. Brandon blinked, startled by her accuracy. I have carried my share, he admitted quietly. The moment hung between them like a fragile glass bell, vibrating in still air. Jenny gently cleared her throat, wanting to ease the heaviness. Well, my mom and I should thank you properly. You changed everything tonight. You do not have to thank me, Brandon said. But we want to, Jenny insisted. Do not tell us how to feel. She sounded exactly like a commander's daughter. Aiko's lips twitched. Brandon, she said, her tone shifting to soft command. Would you consider joining us at this table for more than just a moment? He looked almost overwhelmed by the offer. I do not want to intrude. You are not intruding, Aiko said firmly. You are invited. Brandon inhaled slowly, and something in his shoulders eased as if he had been bracing for rejection long before he took his seat. All right, he said. I will stay for a little while. Jenny broke into a small, relieved smile. Aiko straightened, newfound steadiness settling into her bones. Then let this evening be one of good company, she said. Not rank, not uniforms, just people meeting at the right moment. Brandon nodded. I would like that. And for the first time in years, perhaps longer, Aiko felt a rare sensation wash over her peace. Jenny felt something, too, a quiet spark flickering somewhere behind her ribs. Subtle, but warm, unexpected, and dangerously easy to welcome. Across the restaurant, Bernard watched the scene unfold with narrowing eyes. But he said nothing. The tide had turned, and there was no stemming it now. Not tonight. Not with these three lives intersecting in ways none of them yet understood. Brandon reached for his glass. So, what were you two celebrating? Jenny opened her mouth to answer, but Aiko placed her hand gently on her daughter's. We were not celebrating, the Admiral said softly. We were simply trying to have dinner. She looked at Brandon. And thanks to you, we now can. Dinner service picked up around them, but at the corner table, time seemed to move differently, slower, heavier, as if waiting for something to surface. For a while, they talked lightly about the weather, about cultural differences, about New York's unpredictable charm. Jenny told a quick story about getting lost on the subway, and Brandon laughed, a deep but gentle sound, like a memory stirring. But beneath the easy conversation lay an unspoken tension, a sense that something important sat just beneath the surface of their meeting. Jenny felt it first. She watched Brandon carefully the way he held his glass, like someone trained to control every gesture, the way his eyes tracked exits and angles unconsciously, the way he never seemed to fully relax into his chair. These were not habits of a janitor. When their server stepped away, Jenny leaned a little closer to Brandon and lowered her voice. Can I ask you something a bit odd? Brandon blinked, surprised but not dismissive. Sure. Jenny hesitated for half a heartbeat, then said, Do you remember the explosion at Naha Port about 6 years ago? Aiko froze. Brandon's fingers tightened around his glass so subtly that most people would not have noticed. But Jenny saw the ripple of something old and sharp flash through his eyes. He did not speak. Jenny kept her voice soft. My mother was stationed nearby. She has told me parts of it, enough to know it was bad. Brandon's throat worked as if he were trying to swallow down a memory. Aiko finally turned to face him fully, her voice barely above a whisper. It was not just bad. We lost men that night. Good men. Her eyes drifted slightly unfocused, recalling smoke, chaos, alarms screaming across the harbor. And someone, she continued, someone not Japanese, pulled 6 of my sailors out of the fire, pulled them through debris. No one else dared enter. A breath trembled in her chest, though her posture remained perfectly straight. We never found him. He disappeared before we could reach him. Brandon stared down at the tablecloth. Jenny felt her heartbeat quicken. Mom, she said softly. When he bowed earlier, when he spoke Japanese, it felt like we have seen that before. Aiko nodded slowly. Yes. Brandon exhaled a long, steady breath that sounded far too heavy for a simple memory. I was there, he said quietly. His voice was steady, but the quietness in it made Jenny's skin prickle. Aiko's hands tightened into fists in her lap. She did not breathe. Jenny did not blink. Brandon continued, his eyes distant. I was not supposed to be in the port. I was delivering supply crates a few miles away. Just a routine run. I heard the explosion from the shoreline. By the time I got there, the flames were too high. People were running, screaming. The smoke was... He shook his head lightly. Thick enough to choke the sky. Jenny whispered. So, what did you do? Brandon did not raise his voice. He did not dramatize it. He simply told the truth. I went in. Silence clamped around the table like an invisible hand. Aiko's lips parted, but no sound came out. Jenny leaned closer. Her breath caught. You just went into the fire. There were voices, Brandon said. I could hear men trapped. I did not think. I just moved. Aiko finally found her voice, though it trembled. You carried them. Brandon nodded. The first 2 were conscious. The others were not. Jenny covered her mouth. Aiko swallowed hard. Her eyes glistened, not with weakness, but with the fierce, quiet grief of a commander who still carried the ghosts of fallen soldiers. Why did you not stay? She asked. Why did you not let us thank you? Brandon's gaze dropped. I was not supposed to be involved. Civilians are not meant to be anywhere near military rescue operations. I did not want to complicate things. And He paused, struggling with the next words. I was not in a place in my life where recognition felt right. Aiko stared at him, stunned. Jenny reached out instinctively, placing her hand near his on the table, not touching, but close enough that he could feel her presence. You saved their lives, she whispered. 6 people, 6 families. Brandon did not flinch at praise. Instead, he looked almost ashamed. I did not save everyone. His gaze dimmed. 1 man did not make it. Aiko closed her eyes. She knew exactly who he meant. She remembered holding the young sailor's hand as he slipped away hours later in the medic bay. His family never blamed you, she said softly. They thanked the unknown rescuer for giving them a chance to say goodbye. Brandon looked up, and a flicker of pain loosened its grip on his face. Aiko inhaled deeply, her composure cracking at the edges. All these years, I searched for you. Brandon's eyes widened. Jenny placed a hand on her mother's arm. She was not searching for a hero. She was searching for the man who did what no one else could do. Aiko's next words were barely audible. And now here you sit as a janitor, bowing to me in a restaurant. Brandon's expression softened. Rank does not matter to me. People matter. Aiko pressed a trembling hand to her lips. Jenny felt her heart twist. This man, sitting in worn shoes and a faded uniform, had done something most people never would, and he carried it like a burden, not a badge. Aiko finally spoke, her voice thick with restrained emotion. "Brandon Hayes, you saved part of my command. You saved my people." Brandon bowed his head once more. It was the right thing to do. In that moment, amid clinking glasses, murmured conversations, and warm restaurant lights, the truth settled over them like a quiet revelation. Their lives had not intersected by chance. Something far deeper was at work, something that would change all three of them forever. The maitre d', Bernard, appeared at their table, his expression tight, his jaw clenched. "Mr. Hayes," he said sharply, ignoring the two women entirely, "I need to have a word with you now." Brandon blinked, surprised. "Is everything all right?" "No," Bernard snapped. "It absolutely is not. You were not authorized to engage with guests, and you certainly were not authorized to seat them." Jenny's brows shot up. "Seat them? He did not seat us. You refused to seat us." Bernard continued as if she had not spoken. "This establishment has rules, standards, and clearly you have overstepped every one of them tonight." Aiko's eyes narrowed, her calm demeanor instantly sharpening. "Young man," she said quietly, "you are speaking to the wrong person." But he did not even glance her way. Instead, he lifted a small folded slip of paper. "Mr. Hayes," he said curtly, "consider this your termination notice, effective immediately." Jenny shot to her feet so fast her chair nearly toppled. "What, you are firing him for helping us? That is absurd." Bernard stiffened. "Miss, please sit down. I am handling internal staff matters." Jenny's voice cracked with outrage. "No! You are humiliating a good man in front of us because he made you look small." A hush swept across nearby tables. People sensed a real moment unfolding. Brandon stood slowly, steadying his palm on the table's edge as he rose. "It is all right, Jenny," he said softly. Then he turned to Bernard, his shoulders straight, his tone calm and even. "If that is your decision, I will respect it." Bernard blinked, surprised by the lack of resistance. Aiko stood next, her posture transformed instantly from dignified civilian to commanding admiral, a shift so sharp Bernard instinctively stepped back. "You will retract that notice," she said quietly. I beg your pardon," he stammered. "You heard me?" Her voice was soft, but it had the weight of oceans behind it. "This man is under my protection. You will not punish him for displaying honor." Bernard swallowed hard. "Admiral, with respect, this is a private business. I have every right to—" But Aiko raised one hand, stopping him. Then she turned not to Bernard, but to Brandon. "Brandon," she said, her voice shifting from authoritative to profoundly human. "Do you wish to stay at this job? If you do, I will ensure you keep it." Jenny held her breath. Brandon smiled, small, weary, and entirely genuine. "Aiko," he said softly, "you do not need to fight for me, but you deserve fairness," Jenny insisted. He shook his head. "I have been treated unfairly before. It does not define me." Aiko's eyes glistened, not with pity, but with anger on his behalf. "Then allow me to make this right." Brandon's smile warmed even in the face of humiliation. "You already did," he said quietly. "You listened." Jenny felt her throat tighten. Bernard regained a sliver of confidence. "Mr. Hayes, please return your staff badge at the front desk before you leave." Aiko took a step forward, her voice low and icy, something deep and resolute rising from the part of her that once commanded fleets. "You would fire the man who saved my sailors, who honored me when an entire room looked away. Bernard went pale, but Brandon placed a gentle hand on her arm, stopping her. "Do not," he said quietly. "He does not know, and he does not need to." Aiko looked at him, really looked at him, and saw in his eyes the same selflessness she had seen on countless soldiers under her command. Jenny stood beside her mother. "Brandon, please let us help." He offered them both a soft, grateful exhale. "You helped me more than you know," he said. "But I do not belong in places like this. Not tonight. Not anymore." He folded the termination slip with care, almost tenderness, and placed it back on Bernard's tray. "It is all right," Brandon said again. "I will be fine." He smiled, gentle, humble, heartbreakingly proud. "Do not worry about me. I am used to starting over." Jenny felt something inside her crack, a small, fragile place that had never broken before. Aiko's throat tightened. Her voice came out in a whisper, not meant for anyone but him. "No one should have to be used to that." Brandon bowed his head respectfully, the same way he had bowed when they first met. Aiko bowed back. Jenny's breath caught, and Bernard, stunned into silence, watched a moment he was utterly unworthy of witnessing. Brandon straightened, his pride untouched, his dignity unbroken. "Thank you for the company," he said softly. "It meant more than you know." Then, with a quiet grace that contrasted painfully with the cruelty he had just endured, he stepped away from the table. He did not look defeated. He did not look bitter. He looked free. For several long seconds after Brandon walked away, the world around Admiral Aiko Nakamura and her daughter Jenny seemed suspended, hanging by a thread between outrage and disbelief. Bernard, pale and rattled, retreated with the termination slip as though it were a live fuse, leaving behind a vacuum of silence that swallowed the restaurant's polished elegance whole. Aiko remained standing. Jenny, too. But the absence of Brandon, his quiet strength, the calm he carried like a hidden shield, left an unexpected stillness in the air, as if a vital current had been cut. Aiko drew a slow breath, steadying herself. Years of naval command flowed back into her spine discipline, clarity, purpose. She turned to Jenny, and her daughter saw it instantly, the shift, the resolve. "Mother," Jenny whispered. Aiko's voice was low, firm, carrying the weight of a woman who had spent her life making decisions that shaped the lives of others. "He should not have been punished for showing honor," she said. "Not in my presence, not after what he has done." Jenny nodded, throat tight. "He did not deserve that, not even a little." But beneath her indignation was something softer fear that Brandon might disappear as quickly as he had appeared. Aiko gently touched her daughter's shoulder. "Come," she said. "We are going to speak with him." They left their table and stepped through the dining room. People watched, some pretending not to, others openly staring as the Admiral moved with silent authority toward the hallway where Brandon had disappeared. Near the staff corridor, they spotted him turning in his badge to the older restaurant manager. Brandon stood with his back to them, his posture humble, shoulders squared, not in defiance, but in acceptance. The manager spoke quietly, apologetic it seemed, but Brandon simply nodded with that same gentle restraint that marked every gesture he made. Jenny's heart clenched. Aiko approached with the steady determination of a commander addressing a decorated soldier rather than a man in a janitor's uniform. "Brandon?" she said. He turned, and even though everything inside him seemed to brace for another reprimand, his expression softened immediately when he saw them. "Aiko, Jenny." He gave a small nod. "I did not expect you to come back here." Jenny stepped forward, unable to hide the emotion rising in her voice. "You should not leave without hearing us out." Brandon smiled faintly. There is nothing to hear. These things happen. People in my position well. We are easy to replace. Aiko's eyes sharpened. That is untrue. The manager cleared his throat. Admiral, if I may. She raised a single hand. He fell silent. Aiko faced Brandon, her posture straight, her voice steady but warm. Mr. Hayes, Brandon, your years of service, your sacrifice, your courage during the Naha Port disaster. These are not the actions of a man who is easy to replace. They are the actions of a man nations depend on. Brandon's breath caught. Jenny swallowed hard, her voice trembling. My mom does not say things like that lightly. Aiko stepped closer, her eyes holding his with an intensity that pierced deeper than authority. It carried gratitude long overdue. You saved my people, she said, my sailors, my command, and now tonight. You protected my dignity when everyone else remained silent. She paused. No man like that should ever walk away thinking he is small. Brandon looked down, overwhelmed. How did you carry so much honor into a place like this? She asked gently. He exhaled. Habit, maybe hope. His smile was small, but it held truth. People do not expect much from a janitor. Sometimes that makes it easy to surprise them. Jenny stepped beside her mother. You did not just surprise us, she said softly. You changed everything. Brandon's gaze drifted to her, warm and searching, then quickly pulled back as though he feared seeing too much. Aiko continued. Brandon, before you return home, I want you to hear something. She drew herself up to full height, not as a woman wronged, but as an admiral recognizing a warrior. In my culture, in my service, in my command, we honor those who protect us. You may no longer wear a uniform, but the spirit of a soldier lives in you still. Brandon stared at her, stunned. You are not a man defined by the broom in your hand, Aiko said. You are defined by the battles you have braved, by the lives you have saved. Jenny felt tears sting her eyes at the certainty, the reverence in her mother's tone. She added softly, We want you to know you mattered to us tonight. Brandon blinked rapidly, looking away for a moment, just enough time for the emotion to settle before he faced them again. I do not know what to say, he murmured. Aiko reached out, placing a steady hand on his forearm. You do not need to say anything, she said. Simply know this Japan owes you a debt of gratitude, and I owe you something far more personal. Brandon looked at her, his brows furrowed. What is that? Aiko's voice softened into something he had not expected, something almost maternal. My trust. The words hit him harder than any recognition she could have offered. No one trusted him like that. No one had for years. Jenny stepped closer, her voice warm. And my thanks, she added gently. Brandon breathed in slowly, deeply, as if grounding himself in a moment he never thought he would be worthy of. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, raw. Thank you, he said. Both of you. Tonight meant more than you know. Aiko nodded. It meant something to us, too. The moment felt like a bridge, 3 lives connecting not through coincidence, but through the quiet recognition of souls carrying old wounds, old sacrifices, old hopes. Brandon straightened, a newfound steadiness settling into him. I will walk you back to your table, he said softly. Aiko smiled. No, she replied. Tonight, we walk with you. And together. The 3 of them left the dim hallway, not as a janitor, an admiral, and her daughter, but as people whose paths had crossed for a reason. None of them yet understood. The three walked back toward the dining area. Brandon in the center, Aiko on his left, Jenny on his right, an arrangement that felt unplanned yet strangely natural. The restaurant's soft lights brushed their shoulders, and diners turned to watch as a quiet procession moved across the polished floor. No one spoke, yet something unspoken knit the air around them with warmth and gravity. When they reached their table, Brandon hesitated. "I should not sit," he murmured. "You two should finish your dinner without—" Jenny gently touched his sleeve. "You are sitting," she said with unmistakable resolve. "You are our guest now." Aiko nodded firmly. "Please." Brandon hesitated for only another breath before lowering himself into the chair he had occupied earlier. Aiko and Jenny sat as well, mirroring his movements with grace. But now the closeness between them felt different. Less like strangers meeting by chance, more like companions sharing a moment shaped by fate. A fresh pot of tea arrived, steaming softly. The server set 3 cups before them. "For you," he whispered, almost reverently. Perhaps he had overheard, or perhaps he simply sensed the shift in atmosphere. Brandon poured the tea with a calm, deliberate precision that made Aiko smile. "You have done that before," she said in Japanese. He nodded. In Yokosuka, tea was often shared between shifts, a way to breathe again before returning to duty. Jenny watched him, her expression softening with every detail she discovered. They each lifted their cups, letting the warmth settle into their hands. The conversation that followed did not come immediately. Instead, a quiet understanding filled the space between them. It was Jenny who finally broke the silence. "Brandon, may I ask something personal?" His brow lifted slightly. "You can ask." Jenny hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Earlier when you talked about Naha Port, the way you spoke, it sounded like someone who has lived with that night for a long time." Brandon stared down at the tea, watching the steam drift upward, like memories escaping the past. "It is not a story I tell," he said finally. "Not because I am hiding it, just because some memories feel heavier when spoken aloud." Aiko understood this far too well. "In my line of work, we say some wounds heal only when they are carried together," she said softly. Brandon gave a small, almost fragile smile. "I have always tried not to burden anyone." Jenny leaned forward. "You are not a burden, not to us." He looked up, meeting her eyes, and something shifted. Jenny felt it sudden and quiet, like a breeze slipping through a half-opened window. Not romance, not yet. Something gentler. Recognition, respect, the beginnings of a bond that neither of them had expected. Aiko placed her hands together gently. "You spoke of your past earlier," she said. "You mentioned losing someone." Brandon's shoulders tightened. Jenny instantly regretted her mother's directness, but Aiko gave her a small, reassuring glance before continuing. "I know what it looks like when grief sits in a man's posture," Aiko said. "When sorrow shapes the way he breathes." Brandon exhaled slowly, a tremor moving through it. "My wife," he said. Just 2 words, but they hung in the air with the weight of a full confession. Jenny's hand drifted to her chest. "Brandon, I am so sorry." He nodded gratefully. "She passed 4 years ago. Illness, quick, unfair." He swallowed hard. "I did not handle it well, not at first." Aiko softened. "Few people do." Brandon continued, his voice steady but quiet. "My daughter was 6 at the time. She needed me to be strong, and I tried. I took whatever jobs I could find. Day shifts, night shifts, 3 at once sometimes. His gaze dropped. That is how I ended up here. Jenny blinked. 3 jobs because of medical bills. Brandon did not answer outright, but the silence was answer enough. Aiko clasped her hands tightly. In Japan, we honor the caregiver. A single parent who sacrifices everything is seen as a pillar of strength. Brandon's smile was faint but grateful. America sees it too sometimes, but it is easy to slip through the cracks. Jenny felt her throat tighten. So, you do all this alone? He nodded. My daughter and I. We manage. She is the strong one, braver than I ever was. I try to give her what stability I can. And the house? Aiko asked gently. Earlier you mentioned losing it. Brandon looked away. If I miss one more payment, the bank will take it. Jenny's eyes stung. Does your daughter know? No. His voice firmed. I will not let her worry about something she cannot fix. A small silence followed, warm but heavy with reverence for the man who sat before them. Then Aiko spoke, her tone filled with quiet awe. You remind me of the young men I commanded, she said. Brave, selfless, always carrying more weight than they admit. Brandon shook his head gently. I'm just trying to keep my daughter safe. Aiko leaned forward. Brandon Hayes, she said softly. You are more than you believe yourself to be. More than anyone has given you credit for. Jenny nodded, tears bright in her eyes. You are a good man, a strong man. Brandon looked at them both, emotion flickering behind his steady gaze. I do not know why tonight unfolded the way it did, he whispered. But I am grateful it brought me to this table. Aiko smiled, warm, maternal, almost protective. As am I. Jenny felt something bloom in her chest, something warm, hopeful, unfamiliar, across the restaurant. The night moved on. People laughed, glasses clinked, stories continued. But at their table, 3 wounded hearts began to knit silently together, the first threads of healing weaving tighter with each exchanged breath. Beneath the surface, past scars and quiet grief stirred, but no longer alone, no longer unspoken, no longer carried in isolation. For the first time in a long time, Brandon felt something he thought he had lost forever longing. For a while, the table remained wrapped in a calm, tender quiet, a kind of peace that did not demand words. Outside the silver lantern's tall windows, the New York night deepened, the city lights blurring into soft halos as gentle mist drifted past. Inside, warm light pulled over white linens and polished flatware, creating small pockets of intimacy in the otherwise bustling room. But something restless stirred under the surface. Jenny felt it first. An awareness, subtle but insistent, that the night had reached a turning point. She watched Brandon's posture, the way he held himself slightly inward, as though preparing for something he did not want to name. She saw the flicker in her mother's gaze. Too. An instinct sharpened over decades of leadership. Both women sensed that this fragile calm would not last. Aiko was the one who spoke first. Brandon, she said gently. What will you do now, tonight, I mean? He shrugged with soft resignation. I will go home. My daughter will be asleep by now. I will check on her, tidy up a bit, maybe prepare her lunch for school tomorrow. And tomorrow morning, Aiko pressed. Well, he said quietly, I will look for another job. Jenny's heart clenched. He said it so simply, as though losing his livelihood were merely a shift in weather. No bitterness, no anger, just quiet acceptance. Aiko set down her cup, her gaze firm. "You were fired unjustly." Brandon shook his head. "It is all right." "No," Jenny said sharply. "It is not." Before he could reply, Aiko rose slowly from her chair, graceful, dignified, every movement precise. Her presence drew the attention of nearby tables. Even the soft music seemed to hush in subtle anticipation. "Brandon Hayes," she said, turning not to him first, but toward the front of the restaurant. Bernard stiffened instantly. Aiko lifted her hand, silencing him. "This establishment owes you an apology," she said, her voice calm, but edged with unmistakable authority. "You dismissed a man who acted with honor. You attempted to strip dignity from someone who displayed more grace in a moment of conflict than this entire room combined." People at nearby tables exchanged startled glances. Bernard swallowed hard, color draining from his face. Jenny rose beside her mother, chin lifted. "You should be ashamed. He showed more respect and courage in 5 minutes than most people show in a lifetime." Bernard stammered. "I did not know." Aiko cut him off gently but firmly. "That is precisely the problem. You saw a uniform and made assumptions. Yet you failed to see the man." She stepped closer, her gaze sharp but controlled. "You fired him publicly. You humiliated him, and you will correct that mistake publicly as well." A small ripple of tension moved through the restaurant. Bernard straightened, panic flickering in his eyes. "Admiral, of course. We will reinstate him immediately." But before he could finish, Brandon rose from his seat. "Aiko," he said softly. "Please." She turned to face him. He shook his head gently. "I appreciate what you are doing more than you know, but I do not want that job back." Aiko blinked in surprise. Jenny stared at him. "Brandon, are you sure?" He nodded. "I do not want to return to a place that treated me with so little respect, and I do not want anyone forced to take me back out of fear or pressure." Bernard deflated with relief, but Aiko's expression sharpened again. "Brandon," she said, her voice low, "I am offering to restore your dignity." He smiled softly, the kind of smile that held years of quiet battles. "You did not restore it," he said. "You reminded me I still had it." Those words struck Aiko harder than any reprimand ever had. She held his gaze, and in that moment she saw not the janitor before her, but the soldier from 6 years ago, carrying men through flame and smoke with no expectation of reward. Then came the twist. Aiko stepped forward, looking into Brandon's eyes. "I wish to offer something more." "Mom," Jenny whispered, sensing the shift. Aiko continued, "I want this evening, not the humiliation, not the dismissal, but the truth, to belong to us, to our table, not to this restaurant's judgment." She turned back toward Bernard. "We will pay for the meal, but the remainder of this evening is no longer under your authority." Bernard nodded rapidly. "Yes, Admiral, of course." But Aiko was not done. She turned to Brandon again, her voice gentling. "I want to honor you, Brandon, tonight, not because of your past, but because of the man you are." Brandon stared at her, unsure, humbled, moved. "How?" he murmured. Aiko drew a breath. "By giving you a choice," she said softly. Jenny leaned closer, listening. Aiko stepped toward Bernard again. "I want the bill moved to my name, and I want everything that follows dessert. Drinks. Service handled by the senior staff only. This is my dinner." Bernard's eyes widened, but he nodded. Then Aiko delivered her twist. "But," she said, turning back to Brandon, "it is also your dinner." Brandon blinked. "What do you mean?" Aiko smiled gently. "You are not here as an employee. You are here as an honored guest." Jenny's breath caught. Bernard froze, stunned. But Brandon simply shook his head slowly. "Aiko, I cannot accept that." "You can," she said softly, "because you deserve it." He hesitated, perhaps out of humility, perhaps out of disbelief. But the moment shifted again, when Jenny touched his arm lightly. "Brandon," she whispered, "let us do this for you." His shoulders softened, and for the first time that night, he looked not like a man carrying the world, but like a man momentarily allowed to set it down. "All right," he said quietly. "Then I accept." Aiko nodded, a gesture filled with reverence. Jenny released a small breath, half relief, half emotion. And there, in the glowing lights of the silver lantern, something profound unfolded. A man who had been dismissed was now dignified. A man who had been underestimated was now honored. And a man who had spent years believing he deserved little was now shown how wrong he was. The dinner plates had long been cleared away, replaced by warm cups of green tea and the soft glow of table candles. The silver lantern's atmosphere had shifted as the night deepened. Conversations grew quieter, laughter more mellow, and the polished elegance dimmed into a gentler warmth. Yet the truest warmth in the room pulled at the corner table where 3 lives, once strangers, now sat, intertwined by circumstance and something deeper. For the first time since Brandon had sat down, he seemed to breathe more freely. The tension along his shoulders had eased, replaced with a quiet, almost disbelieving calm. He no longer looked like the man who had been fired earlier that evening. He looked like someone rediscovering the idea that he deserved a seat at a table, not out of charity, but out of earned respect. Aiko watched him with a steady, thoughtful gaze. Something had been forming in her mind, shifting, shaping, solidifying as the night unfolded. Jenny sensed it, even if she could not yet name it. Her mother's expression had changed, taking on the focused intensity of a commander, weighing a decision that could alter the course of lives. When the server refilled their tea and moved away, Aiko folded her hands gracefully. "Brandon," she began, "I have something important to discuss with you." Brandon lifted his gaze, curious. "What is it?" Aiko chose her next words with care. "You speak Japanese fluently. You understand our customs, our etiquette, our values. You have lived among us. You have served beside us more honorably than many who wore the uniform." He looked startled. "Aiko." She raised a hand gently. "Let me finish." Jenny leaned forward, anticipation bright in her eyes. Aiko continued. "There is a position opening soon at the U.S.-Japan Military Cultural Exchange Division. It is a small department, but a vital one, responsible for bridging communication, training, and cultural understanding between our forces." Brandon stared, unsure where this was going. "You would assist with language coordination," Aiko explained. "Liaison tasks and cross-cultural consultations. It is stable work, respected work, and work for which your skills are uniquely suited." Brandon blinked once, twice. "Aiko, I am a janitor." "No," she said firmly. "You are a man who knows our language, our traditions, our world, and you carry yourself as someone who has seen hardship and yet chooses kindness. That, Brandon, is not something that can be taught. It is lived. Jenny nodded eagerly. Mom is right. You would be amazing at that. Brandon shook his head, still overwhelmed. I have not held a real position in years. My resume is patchwork. My life is complicated. Aiko met his eyes, her voice calm and unyielding. Every strong man has a complicated life. He looked away, unsure whether to laugh or break. Jenny leaned closer, her voice soft but certain. You deserve more than survival. Brandon, you deserve a chance at a real future, a better life, not just for your daughter, for you. He swallowed, emotion thickening in his throat. It sounds too good to be real. Aiko offered a gentle smile. It is real, and the position is mine to recommend. If I put your name forward, it will be taken seriously. Brandon shook his head again. Why me? Aiko breathed deeply, her words deliberate. Because I recognize something in you. The same courage I saw in my sailors, the same sense of duty, the same dignity. She paused. And because you saved the lives of my men. Perhaps fate is giving me a chance to return the favor. Brandon's chest tightened. Aiko, I did not save them to be repaid. She nodded. And that is exactly why you deserve the opportunity. The table fell into a soft hush. Brandon looked from Aiko to Jenny and back again. I do not know if I can do it. What if I am not enough? You are enough, Jenny said instantly. Her voice trembled with sincerity. And when Brandon looked at her, he found something in her eyes he had not expected belief. Pure, unwavering belief. Aiko reinforced it quietly. You will not walk that path alone. There will be training, support, guidance. What matters is your heart, and yours has proven its worth. A subtle warmth spread through Brandon, melting the familiar armor of self-doubt he had worn for so long. I would need time to think, he said softly. Of course, Aiko replied. I would never rush you. But he added, It sounds like a chance I never expected. Jenny beamed. Then take it, please. He took a long, steady breath. I will consider it, truly. Aiko bowed her head slightly, acknowledging his sincerity. That is all I ask. The weight of possibility hung in the air light, but substantial, hope taking form, after a moment. Jenny spoke again. What would Emma think? She asked gently. A small emotional smile touched Brandon's lips. She would tell me to go for it, he admitted. She always tells me to try when I'm scared. Smart girl, Jenny said. The smartest, he murmured. Aiko watched them with a soft warmth that surprised even herself. It was not romantic, not yet, but it was undeniably human, undeniably tender. She saw the way Jenny looked at Brandon with growing affection, with admiration, with something that could one day bloom into love. And she saw how Brandon looked back at her daughter with hesitation. Yes, but also with a quiet, dawning protectiveness, the kind only good men carried. Aiko lifted her teacup. To new beginnings, she whispered. Brandon hesitated, then raised his cup. To new beginnings. Jenny clinked her cup gently against theirs. And to second chances. The sound of the cups touching was soft, but it reverberated like a promise that the night had shifted something forever, a promise that Brandon Hayes's life, once trapped in an endless cycle of loss and labor, might finally be opening towards something bright, something worthy, a chance for a new life, one he had earned the hard way, one he would soon discover he deserved. A month passed, its quiet progression reshaping Brandon's life in ways far deeper than the passing of days. Spring had begun its gentle thaw over the city, softening winter's edges and bringing a hint of green to the parks where Emma played. It was subtle, almost shy, a whisper of renewal rather than a declaration. And, in many ways, Brandon felt the same. The job offer Aiko had mentioned was no longer just an idea, through her recommendation and the department's formal review. He had been accepted into the U.S.-Japan Military Cultural Exchange Division. His schedule became full training sessions, orientation meetings, interviews with Japanese and American officers, who welcomed him with the polite curiosity reserved for someone whose past remained partly untold. Yet every time they asked about the Naha Port incident, he merely bowed slightly, neither confirming nor embellishing. He did not want recognition. He wanted purpose, and for the first time in years. He felt it. His daughter Emma was thriving. With the new salary, he had been able to move her into a better school, one with art programs she adored. She came home each day with drawings of oceans, ships, cherry blossoms, images of the world her father had carried within him long before she was born. "You look happier, Daddy," she said one morning at breakfast, swinging her legs beneath the table. "You smile more now." Brandon paused, touched by how effortlessly children speak truth. "Maybe I am," he answered softly. But he knew the truth ran deeper than the job, deeper than the money, deeper even than the relief of saving their home. The truth was that certain people had stepped into his life on a cold night in New York and quietly begun healing things he had stopped believing could heal. The military exchange gala was held in a grand hall decorated with both Japanese and American flags. Lanterns hung overhead, glowing like floating stars. Soft shamisen melodies blended with the low resonance of cello strings, a symbolic harmony between two worlds. Brandon adjusted the collar of his suit, the first new suit he had owned in years. Emma had helped him pick the tie, a deep navy blue. That she insisted made him look like someone important. "Daddy, do not slouch," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve as they stepped inside. "You are supposed to look confident." "I'm confident," he chuckled, mostly. Emma grinned and brushed off his shoulders as though polishing dignity back onto him with her hands. As they entered the hall, people turned, and for the first time, Brandon did not avert his eyes or shrink into the background. He was not here as a janitor or an unknown rescuer. He was here as a man standing at the start of a future he had once thought impossible. And then he saw them. Aiko stood near a display of traditional Japanese art, graceful, elegant, her silver-streaked hair pinned neatly, her posture unmistakably that of a woman accustomed to command. But tonight there was a softness to her expression, a calm that came from pride rather than duty. Beside her stood Jenny. She wore a familiar red dress, the same shade as the one she had worn the night they met, but tonight it was not a symbol of frustration or embarrassment. Tonight it was a quiet echo of something more tender remembrance, gratitude, possibility. Jenny turned, saw Brandon across the room, and her breath caught not with surprise, but with something gentler, warmer, a smile. Small, real, beautiful. Brandon's heart tightened, not with pain, but with something he had forgotten how to feel hope. Aiko noticed him next, and her expression brightened with dignified warmth. "Daddy," Emma whispered, tugging at him excitedly. "They are waving at you." He felt heat rush to his cheeks, an old humility resurfacing, but Emma pushed him lightly from behind. "Go on. They are your friends." "Friends." The word landed softly, like a hand on his shoulder. He crossed the room, and when he reached them, he bowed gently to Aiko. "Aiko," he greeted. "It is good to see you." "Your bow is still perfect," she said, smiling. "I would expect nothing less from you." Emma stepped forward, bowing shyly. Aiko bowed back, amused and charmed. Then Brandon turned to Jenny. She did not bow. Instead, she stepped closer, just enough that the small distance between them felt meaningful. "You look." She paused, her eyes warming. "Different." "Good different?" he asked softly. "Very good," she whispered. Emma tugged his sleeve. "Dad got a fancy job?" she announced proudly. Jenny laughed. "I heard, and I am very proud of him." Brandon exhaled, humbled. "I am still adjusting." Aiko placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You have stepped into a role many men with perfect resumes cannot handle. You have already proven your worth." He nodded, still not entirely used to praise delivered so openly. Jenny watched him carefully. "Does it feel real?" "Not fully, yet," he admitted. "Some days I wake up expecting to mop floors again." Jenny took a breath, her voice softer. "You deserve better than the world gave you, Brandon. I hope you know that now." He looked at her longer than he intended. "I am beginning to understand." Their eyes held for a moment brief, charged, gentle. Aiko noticed but said nothing, only smiling quietly to herself. Later in the evening, after speeches were given and guests mingled, Brandon stepped outside onto the terrace for a moment of fresh air. The night breeze carried faint traces of the ocean, imagined perhaps, but comforting. He leaned on the railing, letting the calm settle over him. Footsteps approached gently behind him. He did not turn. "Beautiful night," he said softly. "It is," Jenny answered. She came to stand beside him, her red dress fluttering slightly in the breeze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Brandon said, "I did not think I belonged in a place like this." Jenny smiled. "You belong wherever your heart leads you." He glanced at her. "I am still learning how to believe that." "Well," she said softly, "let someone believe for you until you can do it yourself." Something loosened in his chest, something long locked away. He looked back at the hall filled with lantern light, then down at the city glowing below them. "A new beginning," he murmured. Jenny nodded. "For all of us." He turned to her, and she to him, not as a janitor and the daughter of an admiral, not as two people bound by circumstance, but as two hearts quietly meeting at the edge of something warm and possible. Inside. Aiko watched from the doorway, her hands folded, her expression tender, proud, and full of relief. She had lost much in her life command. Home, comrades, certainty. But tonight, she saw something she had not seen in a long time, hope. And as Brandon and Jenny stood together beneath the lantern glow, she whispered, soft enough that only her heart could hear it, "My daughter has chosen well." Brandon excelled in his new role at the Military Cultural Exchange Division. His knowledge of Japanese culture and military protocol, combined with his empathetic approach, made him invaluable. He frequently acted as a liaison for sensitive negotiations. Emma's art was gaining recognition. She drew a powerful image of a Japanese harbor in flames, with shadowy figures rescuing sailors, an unconscious echo of her father's past. Brandon displayed it proudly in his new office, a silent testament to a truth only he fully understood. Aiko invited Brandon and Emma to her home for a traditional Japanese dinner. The aroma of miso and grilled fish filled the air, a warm contrast to the sterile gleam of the silver lantern. Over the low table, Aiko, with subtle probing, guided the conversation towards Brandon's time in Yokosuka, hinting at a classified mission involving data security and a specific type of encrypted communication system. Brandon became visibly uncomfortable. He revealed that his wife, Amanda, a brilliant cryptographer, had worked on a critical, highly sensitive data security project for a private defense contractor while they were in Yokosuka. Amanda had grown increasingly paranoid, convinced the data she was protecting held a secret that powerful forces would kill to keep hidden. She had started encrypting everything, even their personal communications, using a unique, almost childlike cipher, one that only Emma might understand. Brandon recounted how Amanda had suddenly vanished from Yokosuka just before their planned return to the United States. The official story was that she had deserted her post and fled, taking classified data. Brandon had never believed it. His own attempts to find her or clear her name were met with brick walls and implied threats from unseen powerful figures. He revealed that Amanda had left him a single. Small wooden box, her emergency kit containing a single, unlabeled data chip, and a cryptic note about truth in shadows. This box had been his secret burden for years, too dangerous to open, too precious to discard. Aiko then shared a top-secret detail her intelligence division had received: a highly encrypted, anonymous distress signal from Yokosuka around the time of Amanda's disappearance. It hinted at a corporate espionage plot involving stolen defense data, but the signal had vanished as quickly as it appeared. The encryption method was unique, almost childlike. Brandon realized with a jolt that Amanda was likely the source of that distress signal, and her disappearance was no desertion but a cover-up. The data chip, the cryptic note, the childlike cipher, all pieces of Amanda's final, desperate act. Brandon, with Aiko and Jenny's unwavering support, finally opened Amanda's wooden box. Inside, nestled amongst dried flowers, was the data chip and a small, hand-drawn map of Yokosuka, marked with 3 seemingly random coordinates. Emma, seeing her mother's unique art style, recognized the cipher instantly. It was based on her childhood drawings, a secret language only she and her mother shared. Emma, using an old diary of her mother's, meticulously deciphered the map. Each coordinate corresponded to a physical location connected to Amanda's project, and a hidden digit. Together, these digits formed a decryption key. Brandon and Aiko attempted to access the data chip, but it was a dead end. However, the map also contained a QR code that, when scanned, led to a deep web forum Amanda had used. They found a ghost account with a final, chilling message: "They took the physical data, but the digital ghost lives on. Find the true key, Lotus in Shadow." A new, formidable antagonist emerged: Corbin Thorne, the ruthless CEO of a competing defense tech firm, notorious for aggressive takeovers and corporate espionage. He was revealed to be the true architect behind Amanda's disappearance and the theft of her invaluable data. He had been meticulously tracking anyone connected to Amanda's old project, his network far-reaching and insidious. A prestigious international defense summit was announced, hosted by Corbin Thorne's firm, celebrating a new, highly anticipated data security system. Aiko and Brandon received invitations as official liaisons. This summit, they quickly realized, was Corbin's chance to finalize a lucrative military contract using Amanda's stolen technology, cementing his power. Brandon then received an anonymous, digitally scrambled message, subtly threatening Emma's safety if he continued to dig. Aiko's intelligence contacts confirmed an active threat on Brandon and his family, directly linked to Corbin Thorne. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. The summit was not just a diplomatic event. It was their only chance to expose Corbin. Emma, overhearing their hushed conversations about her mother's past, became determined to help. She suggested her mother's old digital watch might hold more clues. Amanda often hid data in plain sight, a habit Emma remembered from their secret games. The summit convened in a high-security, ultra-modern convention center. Corbin Thorne strode onto the stage, a picture of corporate triumph, ready to unveil his firm's new defense system, which he claimed was a revolutionary breakthrough. The hall buzzed with international dignitaries, military officials, and an eager press corps. Meanwhile, Emma, with Jenny's patient help, carefully examined Amanda's old digital watch. Its internal memory held fragments of code, cleverly disguised as a daily planner. It pointed to a specific USB drive, the Lotus in Shadow key, at the conference that would fully decrypt Amanda's original data. Aiko, using her diplomatic status, navigated the layers of security with effortless grace, distracting guards and creating opportune openings for Brandon and Jenny. Her presence alone commanded respect, but her actions were subtly subversive, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. Jenny, with her innate social grace and sharp wit, subtly gathered intel, identifying key figures and monitoring Corbin's movements. She created a diversion, a well-placed, seemingly accidental spill that drew attention away from Brandon's carefully planned infiltration route. Brandon, drawing on his deep understanding of infrastructure and his military-honed stealth, bypassed internal security systems, accessing restricted areas where he believed the Lotus in Shadow key was hidden. He faced high-tech obstacles and navigated narrow service corridors, narrowly avoiding detection in several close calls. Unbeknownst to them, Corbin, alerted to their movements by internal spies planted within the division, activated an undetectable network jammer within the convention center. This insidious device cut off all external communication, including the press's ability to broadcast live, isolating the room and controlling the flow of information. Brandon finally located the Lotus in Shadow key, ingeniously disguised as a common USB drive for conference materials, nestled in a forgotten drawer in a rarely used server room. As he attempted to extract it, Corbin Thorne's private security team, alerted by their employer, burst in. A tense physical struggle ensued in the cramped server room. Brandon's agility, quiet strength, and old military training were on full display as he fought to protect the key. Aiko, sensing trouble, arrived just as Brandon was overwhelmed. Her commanding presence, a force refined by years of leadership, deterred the security team, citing diplomatic immunity and international protocol. She extracted Brandon and the key, narrowly escaping the clutches of Corbin's men. They realized with a sinking feeling that they had the key, but Corbin's jammer still had the world deaf and blind. Corbin Thorne, oblivious to their recent success, began his closing remarks, basking in the glow of his supposed triumph. The network jammer still hummed, silently preventing any outside communication, but on a different frequency, a hidden pathway. Brandon, with Jenny and Aiko's frantic help, connected the Lotus in Shadow key to the convention center's main display system, bypassing Corbin's jammed network. The large screens, which had been displaying Corbin's company logo, flickered. Then, with an audible gasp from the audience, they showed Amanda's original, classified research, followed by internal communications revealing Corbin's intricate plot to steal her data and frame her. Corbin's face drained of all color, his arrogant smile dissolving into a mask of pure terror. Then, a pre-recorded video of Amanda, filmed just before her disappearance, played on the screens. She calmly explained how Corbin had stolen her research, meticulously outlining his plan to frame her and sell her technology to rival nations. Her Lotus in Shadow key, she explained, was her contingency plan, a digital time capsule of truth. The hall erupted. News cameras, though unable to broadcast live, recorded every shocking moment. International dignitaries began to leave, their faces etched with disgust. Military police, alerted by Aiko's preemptive calls just before the jammer had gone live, moved in swiftly and arrested Corbin Thorne. The scandal instantly became a global headline, and the carefully constructed facade of Thorne Industries crumbled. Brandon was publicly acknowledged for his pivotal role in exposing the truth and finally clearing Amanda's name. Emma, watching from the audience with Jenny, beamed with an unshakable pride. Her mother's memory finally vindicated. Aiko's quick thinking and unwavering support cemented her legacy as a formidable leader who championed justice, even when it meant defying established power. Months later, Brandon was promoted to a high-ranking position within the Military Cultural Exchange Division. His unique blend of cultural understanding and strategic thinking proving invaluable. Emma excelled in her studies, displaying a sharp mind that mirrored her mother's brilliance. Jenny and Brandon's relationship deepened further, built on mutual respect and shared understanding, a quiet strength that had weathered the storm. They kept Amanda's wooden box and Emma's drawings as cherished symbols of truth found in the most unexpected places. Bernard, the arrogant maitre d' from the Silver Lantern, was fired. Brandon, Aiko, and Jenny returned to the restaurant for a quiet, celebratory dinner, this time with no dress code issues, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served and dignity restored.